welcome everybody to my very first episode of Broken Roads. My name's Colin Mackell, and I'd like to introduce everybody to my guest, Christopher Lomas. And with that, I'm just going to jump right in and ask you, Christopher, to tell us a little bit about who Christopher is.
Okay, well, thanks, Colin. Nice to be here. I'm a ghostwriter. That's how I know Colin. I helped Colin with his book, and I got started as a ghostwriter about 12, 15 years ago now. Before that, I was working as a freelance copywriter and a freelance speechwriter. I didn't necessarily intend to go into that sort of career from the off, but I wound up doing a lot of fanzine writing when I was younger, and then managed to wind up on a trade magazine writing about drainage and wastewater, the very glamorous world of drain trader. And from there, I got into a life of writing company profiles and interviewing people, and set off on a freelance career doing that. And then that led to writing speeches and then longer pieces of work, and then eventually into editing and ghostwriting books. So that's how it all started for me.
We kind of spoke a little bit before this podcast. We had an attempt to try and have a meeting before, and I don't think it went too well. I think you thought that it went probably better than I did. The content was good. I just didn't think the quality of the recording was good. So it's really good to have you back, and thank you for being patient with us. It's been quite some time between then. But you spoke about some of your earlier kind of motivations as a writer, some of the things that inspired you. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's kind of it was interesting to know that you came from a dizzying heights of kind of drainage, whatever that is, whatever that career there was, and but really, what is it that kind of because I take it writing for me anyway, it's a deeply kind of personal thing. It's something that kind of like is really kind of in a innermost self that wants to kind of connect with something. So what is it for you that drew you to writing, drew you to what is it that interests you?
Yeah, it's I suppose a couple of things. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the actual craft, I suppose, of formulating words in a way that makes sense and sounds hopefully interesting and effective. And that for me is a very satisfying process. So I love that. I suppose also because I was probably quite shy growing up. I'm probably still fairly reserved and somewhat introverted. So a lot of people who are of a similar mindset, I suppose, go into things like acting because they can project what they're really feeling inside, but are always quite shy to express. And I suppose going into a writing career is a little bit similar in that, I don't have to worry about an audience because I have the space and the privacy to write down what I want to say, and then it gets communicated to the world after that. So I think perhaps there was an element of that about it as well. And now, of course, I get the great satisfaction of helping people such as yourself to tell stories which they may have had bubbling away in the background for years. They may have had a burning ambition to get their story out into the world. And it's incredibly satisfying and gratifying to be able to help somebody do that. So that it's realizing people's dreams, which have been for them a massive part of their life, but a part of their life they've not been able to actually um, to act out before. So that's a great part
Mm.
of the process.
Yeah, it is interesting that about the kind of the potential personality types that get drawn to certain professions, and it's almost like uh there's this space where you can think and you can feel, and you don't have to have this kind of you're not taking the stage, and you're not having to kind of go out to the world just yet. You're getting time to collect your thoughts, you're getting time to perfect your craft, and you're getting time to be in that space with yourself. And I suppose if you are, I guess, shy is the word, maybe, I don't know, a little bit introvert or whatever it might be, whatever the term is, then I suppose writing makes sense because it's a kind of an insular world, and that, but also that it's a good way to get that energy out there into the world because there's a lot of you in there. there's a lot of what others might not necessarily get to see, or you might get the opportunity to express in everyday life. And so it's a way in which all of those parts of you can kind of come to life and communicate to the rest of the world. Makes a lot of sense. Just kind of thinking about um, just toying around with a few questions here. But if there was somebody in history that you could go back and be a fly in the wall, so you could kind of take your pen and your process and you could go back and write their story, or collaborate with them for them to write, for you to work with them to write their story, who would it be?
It's a question I've pondered on before, and the person I keep coming back to is the astronaut Michael Collins. He was on the Apollo 11 mission, so the first mission that actually went to the moon successfully. But he was the guy that had to stay behind while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin went down to the surface of the moon. Michael Collins had to stay behind in orbit around the moon while they were down there. And I think it's just such a fascinating notion that at that point he was effectively the loneliest person in the universe, completely cut off from everyone else, absolutely on his own. And he was up there knowing there was a very real possibility of his two colleagues not necessarily being able to come back, in which case he would have had to take the decision to return to Earth without them on his own. And what would that have felt like? That must have been an extraordinary, difficult thing for him to weigh up in his mind. But they were all very pragmatic people and they knew that they had to do the right thing. But I think his is a fascinating story. So I would love to have had an opportunity to talk to him about that.
That's an amazing kind of choice there. I was just wondering as well, kind of maybe on a more deeper level, what was the draw to that? Why the person who was isolated from everything else? Because we got to hear about the other astronauts, and Michael Collins, until you mentioned him there, was somebody again who slipped from my awareness. But I have heard of his involvement. But again, he's not the mainstream. He's not the main player or the main character. But very arguably was probably one of the central players in that mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he was cut from slightly different cloth to many of the other astronauts. A lot of them were sort of very gung ho, sort of archetypal American flyboy type, the fearless type. And he was perhaps a little bit more thoughtful, a bit more introspective. And he probably, I think, from reading what he's written elsewhere, had a larger perspective on what he was doing and why it was important and why it was significant. So I think he was a very interesting chap, and perhaps just slightly removed from many of the other astronauts, a slightly different personality type, I think.
Thinking a bit like yourself, really, in some ways, as a kind of a draw there, as a parallel, because you kind of sit behind a lot of things that go on in your world, but you're not necessarily the central player in that. But
Yeah,
but key,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it is indeed my job to be absolutely in the background so I can't be seen. Yes, quite so.
So, what do you like about your role in what you do, and what I guess, are there any frustrations or anything that you wish were different?
Well, I'm very lucky to do the job that I do because I get to meet all sorts of interesting, amazing, extraordinary people, and help them tell their story. As I mentioned, it is a job in which I help them to realize their dreams, which is an amazing thing to do. Because for many people, there is a huge sense of catharsis that comes of writing their story. Particularly, as in your own case, Colin, it's a story which is built on hope and on inspiring other people and in potentially making a difference. So that's a wonderful process to be a part of. Um, there isn't an awful lot I would change about it. I think it would be nice to have unlimited time to work on every project, but perhaps that's not necessarily a good idea. I
Mm.
think every creative endeavor needs an end point, so you have to kind of rush towards the end at some point. Um, I suppose as a ghostwriter, it'd be nice to change the perception around ghostwriting and the slightly misunderstood world of ghostwriting and what ghostwriters do and the legitimacy and validity of that. I might change the slight sense of dreadful fear that I get every time I start a new project and think, oh my goodness, how am I going to possibly tackle this one? How am I going to tell this story in the right way? Because that never goes away, no matter how many times I've done it. But again, I think that's probably it's the same as the nerves for the actor or the musician going on stage. It's probably part of what helps the process kick into gear, I think. So I might change that. The vagaries of freelance work is something I would always change, of course. But apart from that, it's a wonderful thing to do. And as I say, I feel very lucky to be able to do it.
Great. And just kind of thinking back, because I was trying to remember the first time I contacted you. I was getting nudged by my wife because I was trying to get my book. I'd written a bit of it, and I was kind of trying to get it out there. And I was like, no, I don't really want to write this. It could be it's really painful to write my book in particular. It wasn't that I was really sitting here thinking I had something to tell the world. I was thinking there's definitely lots of things I don't want to tell the world. Not anymore. I've told enough. I've told enough of my story, and it's time now for me to just, see my days out, and it doesn't really matter. But my wife did. Well, she bullied me quite a lot, to kind of keep pushing, and because I'm very busy, because I'm always seems like I'm doing a million and one things, and I have all of these plates and I'm juggling in the air. But it seemed, yeah, I can remember kind of sending what I had written out into the world, and I remember penning the original part of what I was doing, and what I was reading at the time, what was influencing me, because I'm a prolific reader and I read lots of stuff at the same time. And I remember people saying to me about all my books, saying, "Have you ever read them?" And I said, "Well, I hope to. I haven't, and it's my goal and my life's ambition to read them. However, I read lots of them, but rarely read a book from the beginning to the end straight through. There are a few exceptions." Um, and so I can just remember all of that, and I remember contacting you. But what was it like to kind of meet me, to experience me, and to work with me? And so, what did you like, or what did you find challenging, and what did you enjoy?
Well, the first thing that I remember about the first conversation is the sense of commitment I felt from you, because people contact me at various stages of that journey of wanting to write a book, and some people are much less sure, they're less certain in their convictions, because maybe they're not quite ready. They think they are, but they're not. But I did very much get the sense from talking to you that you were absolutely ready. It felt as if something had clicked inside you that meant you were going to proceed and you were going to get the book written, come what may. And that's always very compelling. You were immediately very honest about your life experiences, and that is, for a ghostwriter, that's the key thing, to be able to tap into somebody's very real lived experience, that they're not going to hold anything back, that they're not going to be inhibited, particularly in a story which is as difficult and as complicated, and go to some very dark places as yours does. You want to be able to feel that you have the trust of the named author in order to be able to tell that story in the right way. And I think we were able to develop that sense of mutual trust very quickly, so that I knew I would be able to ask you the right kind of questions. I'll be able to probe where necessary to get into, the real nuts and bolts of what you were experiencing, and you weren't going to hold back, and you never did. So I think that
Mm.
was the most wonderful part of it, the truth and the honesty that I was getting from you.
How did you experience some of that? Because obviously the material, there was a lot, there's still a lot that went on the cutting room floor, as they say. There's a lot that kind of you turned out, or I decided wasn't quite appropriate, and then there was quite a lot of last minute kind of additions. But given the material, given I would imagine, you're not a therapist, not that I know of. Um, you're not you're not trained, not that I know of, to kind of work with people with these particular themes, let's say, rather than issues. How did it feel to come up against that material, even though it was raw, even though I was being honest? And I think one of the things about my honesty is because I'm a therapist, because I work in that sector, and because I've been through my story so many times, and so I sometimes might not appreciate the impact or the way in which it's received necessarily. At least that's one of my anxieties. Is I just kind of think like it's okay amongst other professionals or people who know. Sometimes I don't quite know when to how to read the room sometimes, and I just wonder if you kind of you were hearing a lot of stuff. So how was what's it like to receive that kind of what's it like to hear that material, receive it, because and ingest it, I suppose, really.
It is hard.
Mm,
It's absolutely a difficult part of the job. You have to develop somewhat of a thicker skin, and I'm fortunate, I suppose, in that I suppose, carved out a little niche in working with people who have difficult stories to tell, survival stories, you might call them. I think it's impossible not to be affected in some way. But as I mentioned, being a sensitive person, I have to be somewhat careful that I don't let it
mm,
get to me too much, because these are the sorts of things that can really dwell and take up space in your mind and
mm,
bring you down. I think the thing that works against that is that, as I said, they are survival stories. In spite of everything that you went through, the whole, the raison d'etre of the book is the fact that you survived, you pulled through, you endured, and you thrived, in fact, in the end, and you prospered. And the same is true of all of the people that I've worked with. They're not misery memoirs, as they used to be called. They are stories of triumph, ultimately. So I have to weigh the difficult material that I'm hearing with the fact that I know who you are now, and the fact that you are in a much better place, but also the fact that the sheer fact of telling your story is potentially helping other people. So out of that misery comes something good for yourself and potentially something good for other people. And I suppose the other thing is that when you hear these stories about well, in your case, the young Colin, it then becomes important that we do justice to your experience
mm,
the young man and the young boy that you were, and what you went through, to make sure that we relay the events of your life with truth, and with absolute honesty, because it's important that people understand that life is not always easy for people, and life can take them to some very dark places. So
mhm.
we need to do that without ever sensationalizing the events. And you mentioned that we had to leave some things on the cutting room floor. Um, and there are some bits where we had to sort of heavily suggest what had been happening without banging someone over the head with it, because you don't want to get into that sort of into that grey area of relaying information that may be considered as as questionable, or it can't be sensationalized or trivialized. That's the important thing. So as long as we do justice to your experience, then we've done the job right, I think.
And I think that was one of the things that I was kind of because I don't know in terms of your questioning where you kind of developed a kind of phenomenology kind of approach, or a Socratic approach, or you kind of dialectic kind of approach to questioning. I'm not quite sure of your orientation there, but I certainly thought what a great therapist Christopher would make if he wasn't doing what he was doing, because of your ability to get beside the narrative with that kind of over, definitely not intruding into it, letting it to kind of come to life. So again, incredible skill, incredible art, rather than, if it's not necessarily a skill, I would imagine, because you've practiced it for so long, it's become an art form. It's been so kind of deeply integrated into who you are. I guess some of the so getting back to the misconceptions about ghostwriting, which is a term that people, there's all sorts of there's all sorts of misconceptions. I mean, there's if you look at the kind of the fors and againsts and the misconceptions about it out there. in Google land, or social media sphere. It's this idea that people, and I guess it can encompass. There's again everything I suppose would be laid it down on a continuum. There's all these from the nobody does anything and everybody just writes stuff about somebody else, especially autobiographical stuff about famous people, um, which is a bit of a kind of a niche kind of topic for some people and a kind of a niche skill set. But there's this idea that ghostwriters do everything, that even somebody who writes and pens stuff themselves sit alone and never collaborate, never involve others, never speak to anybody else, never kind of ask for feedback, never kind of do any of that stuff. And it's all done for them. And so for me, I suppose there might be this idea that Colin really isn't the author, that it's Christopher Lomas who's the author, and it's Christopher Lomas's book, and not Colin's book. And Colin didn't imprint it, didn't get involved in it, didn't get his hands dirty. Just this book just turned up. There was kind of all this data going into this machine, and then a shiny book turned up on the doorstep. X amount of time later. So I guess for people listening and people who might be thinking about it, and for some might want that package where they kind of go, don't really want to get involved in anything. You write something for me, let me have a look at it, or it might be 2 or 3 steps removed from somebody even, and there might be pieces of information that people get which might be largely in the public sphere. But is Colin the author, and did he really should he really be attributed to Broken Roads?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's increasingly the art of ghostwriting is being formally recognized and appreciated. And very often you will see books which are credited to the named author with someone being the ghostwriter. And you are very much the author, and I am the with in this case. Um, I suppose the best way you can describe it is as if in a musical sense, if you've written the score, perhaps I've arranged it. It's that sort of process. This story couldn't have happened without you. The events that we describe are yours, the events you told me about. And my job is to try and articulate those events in a way that makes sense narratively, but encapsulates as much of your essence, your personality, um, and your actual lived experience as I possibly can. So the closer I get to your voice, the better. Um, so I can do certain things. I can structure it in a way that ensures that narratively it works, but I can't manufacture any events. All of the events are
Mm,
yours.
mm,
Um, and so it is that issue of arranging it in a way that makes it comprehensible and gives it a kind of structure, because unfortunately real lives don't work in a lovely neat narrative way. So I am really just there to arrange those things in a cohesive manner, in a way that is accessible and entertaining and informative. But it is absolutely your story. And it is in, hopefully, if I do, when I do my job right, which hopefully I do, it becomes infused with the essence of Colin,
mm.
or whoever the named author is, and I think that is the case. And it is hugely collaborative because, as you said, there are bits we left out, there are bits we discussed, there are some bits which you didn't want to include, which I would have included. So ultimately, the ultimate arbiter of what goes into the book and what doesn't, and the finished product is you. It would, had you not
Mm.
approved it, and been happy with the way that I'd articulated the story, then it wouldn't be there anyway. So it is very much yours.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that kind of idea of collaboration, originality as well is something that you see every day. So every day in my job, I'm collaborating with people. We produce documents sometimes that might have Colin Mackell written on it. And so maybe the inspiration or the motivation or the pointing towards something needing being done. But there's many authors really in there. There's many collaborators in there. There's many people who have kind of done their thing. The same as I suppose university. You definitely write your essays regardless of what you're writing, you're giving other people credit. It's their work, their ideas, they're inspiring you. They're kind of being engaged with by you. They're being fed back to others, and then they're being structured in a particular way, which is again the kind of the way in which the institution, if you like. And again, if I think about reports and stuff within all of my businesses, there's lots of narrative, right? There's lots of writing, lots of collaboration, lots of things that, shall it go in, shouldn't it go in, what's going to be the impression, how will it be received, does it communicate the right message? And so I think that it's definitely a process, it's a collaboration. And I think that as we were kind of looking at things and we're tweaking things and writing bits of it as well, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, is this me? And then there were periods when, even historically, the narrative as it was unfolding throughout my life and my experiences, they were kind of all over the place. And there was a decision to leave some of it messed up, because that was the way it was experienced, rather than to have it kind of so accurately kind of chronicle the kind of the timeline. And I suppose that was also part of the style. That was a kind of the stylizing of it, because if I tidied it up, that would have then misrepresented the way in which my autobiographical memory was working, my recollection of the events. And I think as well, as I was telling the story, it's very difficult to tell a story, because not only is it known for, not just because of the material was difficult, but because I know so much as a professional, and I know stuff about psychology and memory and the way things work, and especially autobiographical memory. Shouldn't say words that I can't pronounce. Um, and we're often kind of pretty poor recollectors of actual events. There's kind of witness testimony, and lots of research has been done around that. I think one of the things that, as I kind of was reading it and going through it and talking about it, is I came up against all of those things that came up in therapy. Did that really happen? Am I just imagining that? And these are all the disassociative things that happen to clients who definitely had these things happen to them, but there's another part of them that kind of pushes against their memories, kind of going, and so I also had to experience all of those difficulties myself. So I had to relive them. And that's, I suppose, one of the things that surprised me, because I'm kind of telling you stories of which I kind of think, yeah, not that I'm cool with it, but I'm kind of, I'm kind of moved on from that, and I'm reawakening all of these processes again that I've already been through, and that was difficult. So I guess, in terms of lasting impact, did it have a lasting impact on you, or was it just another day in the office? So is it a part of you that will kind of always remember some of that process, or some of my story, or some of what we've done together? Or is it just like, yes, I do, but it's just another day in the office?
I think the honest answer is it's a bit of both. As we discussed earlier, there has to be a certain element of me that draws a line under it and puts a wall around it because of the difficult content, because I can't allow myself to dwell on that too much. So that means that there is that element of, okay, I'm putting that to one side now. Having said that, it's there. It's, I was immersed in, to some extent, as anyone that didn't go through those experiences, I was immersed in that world as well. And I couldn't tell the story unless I felt as if I had some measure of the experiences you went through. So in a way, it's a sort of vicariously living through your experience. So it feels like a weird sort of extension of my own experience, if that makes any sense. And having gone through that process, it's impossible that those experiences and the memories of what we talked about aren't buried down there somewhere. And that, I suppose there are good sides to that as well, in that it's very easy to live, inured to some of the difficult events that people face in the world. Now, when I hear about children in destitution or in hardship, or children that have been abused in some way, my mind will go back to some of our experience, some of our conversations and your experiences. And it will help me empathize with what those people have gone through in a very different way, because I'm thinking about young Colin. As we said, the upside is that you survived, and that gives me a sense of hope that other people can get through their difficult situations when they're in extremis as well. So it does help me to relate to stories that I wouldn't have otherwise have had much reference point to. So in that sense, it kind of lives on in a very positive way, I think. So it is there, I think, as a part of me now, and I choose to look on that as a good thing.
I was just wondering, you were talking about little Colin kind of informing some of the more kind of empathic responses and having a bit of a more of a kind of a, let's say, a lasting effect in terms of the lens in which you experience other things that you then, come up against as you kind of like, as you just live your life and you see other things that you kind of think, oh yeah, that story with Colin. What about as Colin journeyed throughout his life? Was there ever a part in there where you kind of didn't like Colin, the Colin that was coming out of the book, or you kind of felt frustrated, or you kind of thought, what's going on? Or was there always a kind of a sense of empathy that kind of followed even the older Colin? Because, there's things in my life that I had to kind of come to terms with. There's things that I'll never be proud of that happen, but I have compassion and understanding and context. But I'm not proud of them. I wish they were different. I wish I had been a different person. I wish I could have responded to those things differently. So I just wonder if there was kind of parts of me, and as I was kind of evolving and telling my story and talking about me as I grew older, and later difficulties, was there anything there that you kind of thought, I don't know, was different, challenging in a different way?
I think I'm the sort of person that likes to believe that everyone's experiences in life, the bad experiences in life, help to account for what happens to them. So I tend to, people that involve in various sorts of criminal behavior, I'm the kind of person that will always look for the reasons. What were the things in their childhood that precipitated these events? You can't always do that, of course. And there are some people who, for whatever reason, just go off the rails with no particular inspiration for that. In your case, because I was experiencing your story from the very beginning, I knew everything that had happened. Well, I didn't know everything, but I knew all of the events that we discussed that went into the book that happened to you. And I could see the effect that was having on you as you were growing up. And I could feel the conflict between you wanting to do the right thing and sometimes not being able to do the right thing, or not feeling able to do the right thing. So maybe there were one or two moments where I thought you've just taken the wrong path. But again, I could always come back to, well, I absolutely understand why that happened. And of course, that prompts the question then, what would I have done in that situation? How would I have coped in this situation? Would I have been able to endure? Would I have had the strength to do what Colin ultimately did? And I couldn't always say with absolute surety that I would have done the right thing in those situations. So I think understanding what you've been through, which hopefully the people who read your book will, gives you the broader context and the understanding that suggests that your situation at times was virtually impossible. There were occasions in which you would not have been able to do the right thing even. And so all of that understanding means that I couldn't ever have been able to say, I disapprove of what you did, because the route that you were on sometimes led you to a place where you had no alternatives, I think.
It's an interesting. I mean, one of the things, one of the aims, and there were multiple, because people say, well, why did you write the book? Why did you do it? What's its purpose? and there's many purposes of the book. You know, there's personal purposes, but there's a purpose that I hope that is more for the world than there is for me. Because some people who read my book came to me and kind of like, oh, you know, as if I was still in in
Mm.
those experiences, and they're like, oh, oh my goodness, I didn't know, and I'm like, it's fine. You know, I haven't got, one person in particular said to me, I haven't got to the last few chapters, and I went, wow. He said, I don't know what the ending's going to be, and I said, well, I'm the ending, you know,
Yes.
so you can relax. It's okay. I said, but I was kind of, that's again one of my aims, is that I was trying to kind of say, very difficult. It's a very, you know, I strad in my work. I have to kind of make decisions, make judgments about stuff, and often, you know, the heart conflicts with what's necessary. So there was definitely times when Colin needed to be locked up because he was a harm to other people. He was a harm to himself, and he was a harm to other people. Um, and that's a painful thing that we need sometimes to have to a mechanism that removes somebody from the ability to harm themselves and other people. And it can seem sometimes, depending on how liberal you are, liberal minded you are, it can seem like a very cruel thing to do, especially to little Colin, right? Where you kind of go, this guy's been through enough, you know, he's been through hell and then some. Um, but it is about trying to inject this idea of hope, this idea of this kind of immense uh, kind of possibility of tomorrow, of never kind of giving up, never giving up on the human project, never giving up on the idea that things can be different. And I was just kind of wondering, like to that end, who should read this book? Who do you think that this, you know, if you was to pick, you know, two or three kind of groups. I'm not going to say individuals because you know, I think everybody should read this book. Personally, I probably would say that. Not everybody will, obviously, but in terms of bigger picture stuff, who should read this book? Who might benefit from this narrative, this story?
Well, I suppose a couple of groups spring to mind. I mean, the one obvious one would be people in young offenders institution, young people in prison, because as you say, it is a book which espouses a positive message. It's a book which inspires hope, and hope against the odds, because when you consider what you went through, I mean, the odds against you surviving at all, let alone making something impressive of your life, must have been remote, given the challenges that were ahead of you at all times. And for people in that situation who may have had a terrible start in life, who may feel as if they've got no hope whatsoever, I think this sort of book would be enormously beneficial to them. I suppose also the other group that springs to mind, and I don't know what we'd call them, but that part of society which doesn't, for no fault of their own, I'm not casting aspersions here, but that group in society that doesn't understand deprivation and hardship, that have had perhaps a very easy life, that don't understand why certain people go through life events which are very contrary to their own, why people end up involved in crime, why people end up in drugs and gangs and things like that. And I suppose for that group, it would be a sort of compassionate eye opener to the other side of life, the sides of life which they may not have experienced, let alone really believed existed. So I think those sort of slightly diametrically opposed groups would be the perfect people to read your book.
Yeah, so maybe it might be something that kind of brings people together, brings disparate viewpoints, and kind of finds a way to kind of find a way for them to kind of coexist,
Hmm.
to find kind of a resolve. What message do you think it gives to people who are suffering, who have suffered? So adults, one of the subtitles of the book is for adults who live each day in darkness. And that might sound a bit dramatic, but it's genuinely and authentically meant, because I know personally what it's like to live with the harboring a secret, deeply shameful. what is experienced as a deeply shameful, not just one secret, but a deeply shameful kind of existence. There's so many things about me that is rejectable, both to myself and to how the world is experienced, and that is deeply lonely, deeply um, painful. So,
Mm.
what kind of message do you think you it would give, or we could give, or we could say to people who might be young, but definitely, again, this I think does have a message for those going through it, so those living it and it's still happening, still experiencing this stuff. And I think it also speaks to those who have been molested and raped, and because it does obviously cover all of those themes deeply
Mm.
and intimately and sensitively, I hope. Um, yeah, what do you think? Is there a message to these people? Is there something in there that without being insensitive to those experiences and those contexts that those people might be in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, there are a number of things really. I think perhaps the most important is that there were times in your story in which you were absolutely in extremis, when everything had gone against you, when you were as close as one could possibly get to surrendering, to giving up. There were times when I know that you just wanted to die. Um, and one of the biggest, most important messages is that even in that situation, you just found enough resolve, enough conviction and strength to live another day, to carry on, to endure. In the forlorn hope it must have seemed at the time that you could somehow lift yourself out of your situation. And yet, bit by bit, you did. And I think that is an incredibly powerful message, because you, more than many other people that I have ever met, have had to endure against insurmountable odds. And the fact that you did that just gives enough hope that other people can do the same. It doesn't have to
Mm,
be a meteoric rise out of the ashes. It can be bit by bit, as indeed your survival story shows. And there were steps back as well as steps forward along the way. And I think that's incredibly powerful, to know that people can survive the indomitability, I suppose, of the human spirit. Um, Sustains us, and that's
mm,
an important message. And I think also that theme about shame, which you mentioned, I think shame holds a lot of people back. And again, I hope that if the book communicates a message, is that how liberating and empowering it is to try and to step out of the shadow of shame, I suppose, um, to acknowledge the fact that we have all done things that we're not necessarily proud of, to a greater or lesser extent. We've all done things that embarrass us, um, that in some way hold us back, because we're still sort of shackled to those things and holding on to them. And I think if we can all be a little bit more honest about the fact that we're very fallible as humans, um, and allow ourselves to forgive ourselves and others, then how empowering that can be too.
great. Yeah, thank you. So, what would you say to people who don't think they've got a story to tell?
Well, I genuinely think everyone's got a story to tell. I think the problem really is that people don't always feel worthy. They think, who am I? What story do I have to tell? Who on earth will read my story? Um, and everyone has a life which is of consequence to somebody. You can write your story. I've worked with people who have set out to write a story for a wider audience, such as yourself, and I've gone on to get that published. But I've also worked with people that have decided to write a story purely for their own benefit, because they have absolutely needed to get the story of their life out on paper, so they can look at it slightly more objectively, so they can see the path they've been on in life, the journey that they've experienced. And sometimes that is a sort of a pause in their story. It's a full stop. It's a way of drawing a line under one set of experiences and saying, that's done. That's that volume. Now I'm moving forward into a new, fresher future. So that's a good motivation. And that's even if nobody else reads it. But I worked with somebody recently who thought she didn't have much of a story, that nobody would be interested. And of course, as soon as she started to tell people that she was telling her story, more and more people decided that they would like to read it. And that is often the way, because we're so used to the idea that our lives are very mundane and boring and day to day. We don't imagine that other people would be interested in the connections that we've made, in the relationships that we've had, in the journeys that we've been on. But all of these things are intensely interesting to the right people. And a lot of people I work with, I suggest that they put their books in local libraries, because they become like a sort of social history. They talk about things which don't exist anymore. They talk about ways of life which have faded, people in their lives who would otherwise be forgotten. So it's a sort of an ongoing living testimony of so many things, which makes it, I think, so worthwhile, and so healthy. It really is a healthy process. You know, we can't promise catharsis for everyone, but I think people do tend to feel a lot lighter having put their record down on paper, and then feel like they're able to move on. And so I would say to everyone, you know, if you have a story that you want to tell, you should absolutely do it. It is a wonderful experience, whether you do it yourself or with a ghostwriter. And there are many ways of telling your story. But yes, absolutely, we do all have a story to tell. I'll have to tell my own someday, but I'm not quite ready for that yet, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's well documented. There's such a thing as narrative therapy, the
Mm,
therapeutic benefits, and I think that we've lost the art. I think that I read a book some time ago called "Storytelling in the Search for Meaning" by Curtin Ketchum, and it was all about just how we don't tell stories, how things were passed down, how oral tradition was the way in which people learn to overcome obstacles in life and understand difficulties and understand challenges, and also be able to recognize triumphs,
mm.
and which things should be celebrated and in what way. And just that kind of sitting around somewhere, you know, often, you know, music or, you know, a beverage or talking and telling stories, and this is the kind of the written form where things are kind of put to life in on paper, and then somebody can pick it up a million miles away from that person's life and somehow be transported into someone else's story. So it's very, very powerful, and I
Yeah,
agree with you. I believe everyone's got a story.
yeah, and you really never know who your story is going to touch.
Mm.
It can help. It can help one people. It can help 1,000 people. The impact of a story can be absolutely profound. So yeah,
Or it can
it
help you.
really is.
If it doesn't help anyone else, it can help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So moving into something hopefully a little bit, let's say off topic but relevant. So three books people should read before they die, and why?
Okay, so I would go for a factual book, an autobiography, and a novel. And
Mm,
from a factual book, I would say a book called Factfulness, which was published posthumously by a chap called Hans Rosling, who was a Swedish doctor and statistician. And the premise of the book really is that, based on statistics and his intensive research, that the world is in a slightly better place than we all believe it is, because we all have preconceptions about how the world works and about its limitations. And this book challenges that. It challenges our beliefs about poverty and progress and opportunity and other key metrics, using his extensive research and his absolute statistical basis. So it is, as the title implies, absolutely factually based. It's 7 or 8 years old now, actually, and the world has changed quite a lot in the last 7 or 8 years,
mm,
obviously. But I think it still gives a genuine sense of hope for the future, which which we can see from his book. And I think the website still endures if anyone wants to go and have a look at the website, which I believe is updated with statistics about progress across various metrics. So check that out. I think that's a very inspiring book. For a memoir, well, I mentioned Michael Collins, the astronaut, earlier, and he did actually write his memoir, which is called Carrying My Fire. And I think his unique perspective on the world and on life as one of only a handful of people that have orbited another celestial body is unique. He writes with a lot of wit and self-awareness. It's frank and it's uncompromising when it needs to be, and it helps me to consider I suppose the smallness of life, but also the largeness of life. The fact that humans are capable of such extraordinary things as going to the moon, especially in the 1960s, when things were pretty much held together by sticky tape and hope, essentially. And it's the most literate of all of the autobiographies written by astronauts. As I say, he was, I think, cut from a different cloth, and it really shows in the book. It's a really beautiful story. And for a novel, I would say The Solitaire Mystery by Jostein Gaarder, a Norwegian author. It's the slightly less well-known successor to Sophie's World, which was a huge worldwide success, I think. And it's one of those stories within a storybook. So there's a central mystery running through the story, which is revealed as the book goes on, but it's interspersed with explorations of sort of philosophical and metaphysical ideas. But it's very fairy tale-like. You can feel sort of bits of Alice in Wonderland in there and that sort of tradition of storytelling. And I probably read it at the right sort of time when I was at university, and it's sort of helped open my eyes to the world of wonders. It's that sort of book. It's not a very naturalistic sort of story. It is, as I said, quite fairy tale like, detached from reality, I suppose. But I quite like that. And I think also probably, although I haven't put this to the test yet, I think it's one of those books you can go back to at different life stages and get something slightly different from it. So I will have to put that to the test one of these days when I have the time.
Excellent. Great choice of books. So 3 favorite actors and why? Why are they your favorite actors?
Okay. Yeah. So I seem to be able to identify a lot of fairly obscure television actors from the 60s, 70s, and 80s when a lot of my favorite programs were being made. But I tend to favor sort of character actors over the sort of star actors. I tend to find them more interesting. These days, people like Toby Jones and Eddie Marsan and people like that. But I think probably one of the most extraordinary acting performances I've seen recently was Mark Rylance in Wolf Hall, playing Thomas Cromwell. People often talk about inhabiting a role, and I think his performance in the Hilary Mantel adaptations really exemplifies that. It was in a very storied cast. He was up against so many other astonishing actors. But the pressure on him was immense. I think he must have been in about 90% of the scenes. So it was an astonishing workload. But you couldn't take your eyes off him. It was a mesmerizing performance, but very subtle, very nuanced. He did so much with his face, with his eyes. It felt as if you could really see down into his soul. It was that sort of performance. Really incredible. From a slightly different cloth, I would say Jeremy Brett, who played Sherlock Holmes. I think he's the definitive Holmes. I'm a big fan of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and his work in the 80s and 90s. It's quite stylized. It's very different, I suppose, to Mark Rylance. It's quite theatrical. It's full of mannerisms and tics and strange little bits of business that he does. But he was absolutely that character, and he's an actor who really suffered for his art. I think playing Holmes over the course of 10, 12 years, whatever it was, really affected him and hurt him in various ways. And it took a toll. And he was physically and psychologically unwell towards the end of that process, and they weren't able to finish filming The Canon before he died. But his performance is, to me, definitive. When I envisage Sherlock Holmes, it's Jeremy Brett that I think of. So I would say him. And I would also say Patrick McGoohan from The Prisoner. Again, one of my favorite series. And again, he's an interesting chap because he could have been an absolute leading man. I think he was up for James Bond at one stage, but wasn't interested in the character because he didn't approve of the morality of James Bond, interestingly enough. So he's got those sort of leading man qualities, but he gives a very idiosyncratic performance. And I'm thinking particularly of his role in The Prisoner, which he partly wrote and directed a lot of as well. And there are times when he almost shouts his lines in a very strange way, which kind of removes you from the reality of the piece, which I think is intentional. And he plays against type so often. So when he's supposed to be sort of romancing someone, he keeps his distance from them and presents the romance in a kind of weird confrontational way. And he does lots of interesting, strange things which sort of catch you out and keep you interested. And it's a very sort of magnetic, twinkly, surprising performance. So I would say him as well.
Amazing. Such a kind of deep and contoured choice of individuals and characters there, just like your books. Very interesting indeed. And what we will try and get some of the links to these things as well that we'll kind of stick later on in the description for people if they're kind of interested in exploring these things more. Three favorite musicians or bands.
Okay. Yes. When I was growing up, I wasn't especially interested in pop music very much. I listened to what my sister listened to a little bit, but my record collection at a very early age consisted of BBC sound effects records and incidental music from Doctor Who and things like that. So when I finally got into music, I was quite drawn to electronic music because of the work of the Radiophonic Workshop. And I think the band that exemplifies electronic music is Tangerine Dream, the German band who got started in the 60s. And their recorded output is absolutely vast. It's well over 100 albums, including soundtracks and live improvisations and all sorts. And even in a sort of fairly narrow field as electronic music, their music covers quite a wide range. Some of it's quite abstract, some of it's quite ethereal. Then it got more rhythmic and more melodic. And so there's all sorts of different sort of sound palettes and sound worlds that they inhabit. And listening to their catalogue is, I suppose, like listening to a history of the synthesizer, really. Because they started off with sort of Moogs and Mellotrons and sort of worked their way through various different iterations. And they are still going now in a revised form. But after several sort of peaks and troughs, and they had some doldrums for many years, they are now kind of resurgent and doing very interesting music again. And I'm still working on completing the catalogue, but I've got probably about 95% of their albums, some of which I shouldn't have because they're actually not very good. But their finest work is really mesmerizing and captivating, I think. So I suppose my favorite band and artist of all time would be Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson. I'm a big fan of progressive rock, especially the sort of progressive rock of the of England and Europe, Italy particularly in the 70s. And Jethro Tull were just an incredibly, and are still going, an incredibly eclectic band, drawing influences from various musical strands. And their take on progressive rock is infused with a lot of British folk and a lot of other influences from jazz and classical music. And then they went through a sort of electronic phase, which is very interesting. And Ian Anderson is a wonderful lyricist, has a great turn of phrase and a wry observational look at the world. and I love most of the catalogue, with a few outliers, but yeah, they have probably been my favourites for decades, I would say. And there's always, because again their catalogue is so diverse, there's always a different sort of sound and feel which you can engage in. And third, I would say, I suppose over the last 5 years, I've sort of been dipping my toes into sort of 20th century symphonic and orchestral music, um, things like Shostakovich, and Bartok and stuff like that. But I got into Mahler, sort of late 19th century, early 20th century composer. I think probably because a lot of his music is quite big and bombastic. It's if you're moving from progressive rock into that world, I think he's a good one to go to, because a lot of his stuff feels like a sort of progressive rock epic, and it's quite strident and very discordant bits and big epic tragic bits. So I have been enjoying a lot of that over the last few years. So I would say he would exemplify that whole oeuvre of music for me.
Mm. So taking all of those things, I mean, some of those I'm familiar with, some I'm not. And I was just thinking about the your first choice in the music. Is that similar genre to kind of like the more kind of popular kind of Tubular Bells and um, the other synthesizer work there? Is it kind of in the genre, maybe at a different end of it, or is it completely outside of that genre?
Yeah, it is sort of adjacent, I would say, and some bits more than others. Earlier on in their existence, the music was very abstract,
Mm.
um, and a little bit sort of detached, and ethereal. But then some of it is a lot more accessible and obviously more melodic, and that would be closer to Tubular Bells, or a bit of Jean-Michel Jarre, perhaps something
Jean-Michel
like
Jarre,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but not as obviously, not with such a pop sensibility.
Mm, mm. So all of these things collaboratively, what do you think they say about you? What do you think they say about you? Because I'm kind of listening to them and thinking about you kind of mentioning earlier about your kind of personality being a bit kind of withdrawn, a bit shy, a bit reserved, and so you kind of and these seem quite thoughtful in terms of that they're expressing parts of you. So even although that you might have this kind of a kind of calm and reserved demeanor, these might be the ways in which you kind of express these other parts of yourself. These communicate that there's this fully rounded kind of sense of who you are as a person. There's these kind of deep contours and these kind of complex kind of interwoven themes that kind of speak to you and speak to the world. And so these different mediums, because that's definitely what I think. I think the books that resonate with us, the people that resonate with us, and the music that resonates with us are an extension of something about who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly true. I suppose with the Tangerine Dream stuff, that is quite immersive. That's the sort of thing you would dip into and sort of detach from everything for 45 minutes. Some of them are quite cinematic, so you go on a journey. Some of them are a bit otherworldly, so you feel as if you are sort of tapping into something a bit beyond yourself, I suppose, that kind of idea. But then again, some of them are quite rhythmic, and that sort of exemplifies that other side of something a little bit more immediately accessible. And yeah, you're right. I think I find engaging with music a very emotional process.
Mm,
I of all the arts, it's the one that touches me the most, actually. I mean, although my business is in words, I think music is where I find a lot of meaning. I
mm,
can find it quite powerful, quite uplifting, quite devastating at times, certainly. So yeah, I do turn to music to experience some of these things. Um, and yeah, certainly with the Mahler music and things like that, you do go on a very big sort of deep inner journey from from something into adversity and then into triumph again. Not unlike your own story, there's a parallel there as well, I think. Um, and I like that sense. For me, that's more engaging than watching a film generally, because it
Yeah.
tugs so many different heartstrings, and it consumes me, I think. So I get all of that from it.
And would it be fair to say that it's a way in which you can be intimate without having to overtly be that? So some way in which you can experience intimacy, but it's kind of innermost intimacy. It's kind of experienced really personally.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and probably also when we talked a bit about catharsis, there's probably an element of that, and it might even tie in with what we were talking about earlier. For having to experience the difficulty of other people's stories, but perhaps not necessarily being able to expunge them or achieve any catharsis from them because they weren't mine. Some
Mm.
piece of music probably help you to achieve that, I think, because they resonate on those same frequencies, perhaps, and then you are able to kind of live through those some of those feelings in a more healthy way.
So on a bit more of again, staying in the same vein, but a slightly different twist. 3 things you would take to a desert island and why?
Okay. Do you know, I often think about this question. It's a little personal pet project. And I know you're saying 3 things you take there rather than 3 things that would be there as fantasy
3
items.
things
So,
you would take there, yeah, 3
yeah,
things you would
okay.
take there, yeah.
All right. So I'm going to assume that there's some means of shelter and fresh running water and food and
Sh
all of
sh
those things.
it's your island. It's deserted, but it's your island. So apart from
Okay.
that, it can be whatever you want it to be. Yeah. So whatever's already there from
Okay.
your world is there.
All
Your
right. Well,
personal island.
okay, great. In that case, I'm going to take well, thinking about the practicalities, I'm going to take an iPod and headphones, and we'll gloss over how I'm going to charge them at this point. But I would need access to music.
Through a power bank in for sort of
Perfect. Okay.
solar charging power bank. It's included in the
Excellent.
package, so it still counts as your one.
I like it. Okay, I could be
Yeah.
happy with that then. So sort of an 80 gigabyte iPod or something will
Yeah.
keep me going, I think, for as long as I'm there. Um, I'm very into chess at the moment. I played chess when I was young, and I taught my son to play some years ago, and I've just got back into it. So I would take a chess computer, that could be solar powered, and a book of chess openings, so I could put my time to productive use. Um, and more prosaically, I feel like I should take lots of paper and pens, so I could at least feel like I was doing my 9 to 5, and I
There
could
we
work on my own memoir, my desert island memoir.
there we go. There we go. Maybe that's how we're going to get Christopher Lomas's memoir,
Yeah,
Desert Island, designed just for you. Yeah.
there you go.
Excellent. Great. Great. So we're starting to kind of obviously come into the kind of the final part of our meeting today, and I just wanted to kind of try and wrap things up by asking, is there any questions you wanted to ask me?
Well, I think the most interesting thing for me, Colin, is, and it's something that applies to other people I work with. And I imagine one of the things that discourages people from telling their story is the sense of opening yourself up to scrutiny. So I would like to know, what was the experience of interacting with your family, friends, colleagues like once you knew that they had read your book? And did any of them
Mm.
find that difficult? I think you touched on this a little bit earlier.
Well, there's a such a different range of responses, and it's not a simple answer. And I think always kind of slightly cheating because I am, I've been telling my story enough in different ways to different people in professional settings. I've been working with this material, and so the material is no surprise to me, but I guess it was how other people were going to perceive it. So
Mhm.
I might have in the past gone to 12-step meeting, sat in front of a therapist, been part of a training program, worked with other groups of people, done other experiential stuff. And so some of the material, not all of it, not in the way that the book tells it, still prescriptively, if you like. Um, and so these people all had a reason for engaging with the story. It was a support group, or it was a therapy group, or it was treatment, or it was something else. so in that context, it's kind of that gave me, you know, part of what I've done and part of what I do was kind of my job. You know, it was part of what I did. It wasn't all what I do, but it was part of my job. But what was interesting was different people who didn't know that about me. And it was a big consideration, you know, again, why some of the stuff probably didn't get out, will never get out, is because of my children, because my wife, because of my colleagues. It's only so, you know, because I think my book is so kind of revealing in so many different ways.
Mm.
It's it I also have to be. It's like it's okay. I can go deep and deeper, and then deeper again, and deeper still, and deeper, 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 deeper. But can they, and is it fair to ask that of them? Was one of the things that I had to kind of think about, um, because of the kind of the changing and potential shift in their perception, you know, of me, and also colleagues, people who work for me, right?
Mm.
People who think here's Colin, he's, you know, the CEO, or he's whatever it is, you know. On a good day, he's a CEO. Well, I suppose not on a good day, he's a range of different things. However, the the response I think was generally, um, I think people were taken aback. I think people didn't know what to say. I
Mm.
think it was received with a sense of, yeah, I think I think people, and again, I don't want to think people what people's responses were. I'm filling in the blanks, and people just kind of went, yeah, you know, it was kind of a deadening non-response, just kind of, and then all the way to kind of people being overly fussed about me, you know, kind of
Mm.
wanting to treat me differently, uh, which was not a nice experience, because it was again, I tried to be really clear that I wasn't looking for people's pity. I understand it's hard to avoid when you confront this material. It automatically brings up a sense of feeling feeling just terrible for that person, just kind of thinking this is just awful, awful, awful things. But, and I'm not taking away from the authenticity of what people were saying, but it's kind of like I didn't want people to miss the point of the book.
Mm.
It was kind of like I had to tell that story to get to the point that I really want to communicate. There was so many different contours, so many different ways in which it weaved in amongst different experiences, and so. There were moments I've regretted doing the book. I thought I wish I didn't do this, and there were moments that I thought, yeah. I mean, when I regretted it quite a lot. I kind of thought, why did I do this? Why did I bother? I should have just left it. It was okay. Things were okay then, you know. But that, I think that's just normal. I think those experiences of kind of like, I think I'd never experienced the world as a kind of a unified position on anything. My experiences are always kind of fluid and always changing, and shifting. And so I don't try to kind of hold on to kind of, you know, kind of a legalistic framework of understanding or interpretation. Um, and so, but overall, by a major country mile, shall we say, um, I'm very happy. I'm very glad, and I suppose if it does reach one person, other than me,
Yeah.
it reaches one person and it causes one person to kind of change the way in which they see themselves, and it causes them to feel, you know, it stops them from you know, killing themselves, or, you know, slipping deeper into their addictions, or, you know, just being so isolated, or it causes someone to go and get help, to go and speak to somebody safe, somebody, you know, they can trust, then it's been worth it. And I think, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a theme, if there is such a thing to be found within the book in terms of people's responses. I think overwhelming has been the kind of the wow factor, the kind of the wow.
Mm.
You know, people have been shocked. It's kind of like that. Wow, you know. I think beyond that, the experiences have all been slightly kind of different from not knowing what to say. There's the kind of the wow, and then there's a kind of a silence,
Right.
and then there's a kind of a wow, and people keep saying to me, how did you do it? And I said, well, it's in the book. It's kind of it's kind of in the book. I don't really say much more beyond that, and I give my reasons for it there. At least, I'll never fully know. And but I think and some people have said it's just masterful. It's a masterpiece of how it weaves all these different experiences into a kind of a climax of um, communicating a point and kind of getting where it does, because it straddles all those different things. And again, I think that was the purpose. That was the purpose of the journey, the purpose of what the project was. So I think that the experiences are still coming in. I'm still assimilating them,
Mm.
and I'm still kind of trying to see what we do. One of the things that this podcast is hopefully going to do um, is going to kind of hard launch this book and kind of really explore it amongst many other themes that are out there in the world and bring it to other people's awareness. And because of this experience, I'm working on other books myself, having gone through the process with you, and I'm kind of pulling different things together and thinking about my next steps. Where am I going in my life, and what am I going to be doing next, and
Mm.
those kind of things. Because we there's a bit in the book where I spoke about my art, and
Yeah.
I think I spoke about my poetry
Mm.
and how it all got taken away from me. Um, and there seems to have been this theme, because I'm a very creative person as well. Kind of the way in which I express my creativeness today is that I create businesses, I create opportunities, I create services, I create teams, I create ideas, and I kind of foster those, and I kind of nurture those, and I kind of bring lots of different people in to collaborate on that. And all of those things are propagated on doing good, trying to change things in the world. Um, and as I'm getting older, kind of more feeling drawn back to um, that there's something beautiful that I want to communicate to the world, that I felt I wanted to do then. Because the art that I was doing at such a young age, I was a very small boy, and it was, and I mean, this is not false memory or me trying to tell myself something that wasn't true. But as much as I can be a test, much as I can stand testimony to my own experiences, that was exceptional. It was beyond the age, and it was beyond
Mm.
what anybody would have experienced. So there was something that was natural, that was already there. My poetry as well was already, its prose, its narrative, its structure. I remember engaging with little books I managed to somehow find things in charity shops, or that had old library book stamps in them, ancient Egyptian stuff. There was poetry about, I can't even remember the poet, but he wrote about animals. So he gave prose and narrative to animals, and told
Mm.
stories of animals and how they experience human beings, how they experience the world. So he gave them a
Yeah.
voice, and this fascinated me. This made me think about my relationship with animals, and I think it changed my relationship with animals. In the first book, and of course, there was a point in my life when I didn't read, couldn't read, I was too traumatized to kind of
Mm.
read. My brain was kind of trying to cope with many other things. But the first book that I managed to, I would have read other books before then, but the first book that really stuck with me was Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald
Mm.
Dahl.
Yeah.
And I just loved that book. I just remember this kind of cheeky, smart fox, kind of
Yeah.
outwitting everybody. He was just one step ahead of everybody, and the kind of the whole thing just, yeah. And I remember reading some Dickens stuff, and I remember my poetry kind of stemmed a little bit from the kind of Dickens poem, the Christmas, the girl who sold matches, or the matchstick girl. Can't quite remember the story, but that's where the I Am a Sparrow poem kind
Yeah.
of was inspired from,
Right.
and it deeply resonated with me. So yeah, I think the range of experiences, the range of responses, they're still coming in. They vary from wow and well done to wow, uh, don't know what to say to you,
Yeah.
and wow, um, still processing it. And something that's quite common is that some people get it and read it in one go, like
Okay.
literally can't put it down.
Yeah.
So they pick it up and they go through it and they can't stop. And so they read it in one hit. And I kind of thought that was some of our aim, right? Was that people could go
Mm.
on holiday or people could, travel somewhere and it'd be a book that they might pick up and they might get to, although slightly probably quite cruel of me to think that a book like that would be enjoyable as you go on holiday. Um, but anyway, yeah. So I think the book's been so far in the small pool of its exposure is and I've had many people come to me when I've had events and they've asked me to sign the book. They don't never know they knew about the
Mm.
book, and so we had a conference recently and I gave some copies away, signed some copies for people who were there. And then I never hear back from them. I'm always curious. I'm like, please give me some feedback.
Yeah.
Please tell me what did you read it? Did you not read it? Did you start reading it? You couldn't put it down. What was going on? And this again is what I'm hoping I can do here on this podcast as well as things evolve, is that I can engage maybe with some of the people who read the book, read, and encourage other people, and also encourage all of it, because I know there's been, I don't know how many, it's not been a lot, there's been more than I thought would have read it. um and if only half of those would leave a review, it would start to push it up
Yes.
the algorithm, and
Yeah.
kind of, if they would recommend it. And I've done my bit as well by trying to leave, if I go on holiday somewhere, I try to leave it in the hotel lobby and kind of sign a copy and
Yeah.
just kind of give a little bit of a preface to that. So yeah, it's been varied, it's been mixed. I don't know what people will make of it as as things progress. But yeah, it's been yeah, been it's been everything on the spectrum.
Mm.
I haven't had anybody yet go, it's terrible. But I
Right.
think it's not that kind of book
No,
that a person would say that if
I
they
don't
thought
think so.
that. Yeah. So, which is, don't know if that's a good thing. It just is a social convention, I suppose. Uh, yeah.
And
Okay.
what's your next step with the podcast? It sounds like it's going to be an interesting lesson. I'll have to stay
Well, look,
tuned for what's coming next.
I'm really grateful. Christopher's in the background. There's Sophie. She's kind of got experience with this stuff. She's been doing amazing. It's been, it's this podcast has been like so many false starts. We've been trying to get it. I remember I was on LinkedIn saying it's coming, it's coming. It didn't
Yeah.
come, and it went, and and we tried to have a conversation some time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, finally, I think that I've got a kind of a team together. We've got vision, we've got creativity, we've got collaboration, and I'm really looking forward. The aim is to we're trying to find its identity,
Mm.
Christopher. It doesn't have one yet. It's its central themes around my book and me,
Yeah.
and but that said, my central theme is about the world and people, and kind of how we overcome these things and how we come back together and how we can tell stories and how narratives are important. Um, and also uh, you know, how getting your voice out there is also important. So I think next steps for this podcast is also many, many things. I'm hoping it's going to get some traction. I'm hoping it's going to get some, hoping to do some interactive stuff. We're not doing anything live for the time being because I'm
Mm.
still building up my courage and my experience
Mm.
and getting, I'm gonna unfortunately kind of like try and overcome some of my rough edges, if you like, in terms of as I build up confidence. Um, but I'm really hoping to have conversations with lots and lots of people in the world, big collaborators, small collaborators, people, people who are well known, people who are not, and again, I suppose, and for a different reason, I like people. I like people. I like their stories. I'm fascinated with just people, just what people do, their skills, what they say. You're talking about this mathematician, his facts. It's Jordan Peterson talks a little bit about how everybody's dooming and glooming it. You know, the kind of the it's global warming and it's the end of the world and it's this and it's that, but how by magnitudes of difference, you know, we've been lifted out of poverty. We've been, you know, the
Mhm.
world is progressing in so
Yeah.
many different ways. How water is cleaner, how we know more about our bodies and health and science and medicine. And in so many kind of accumulative and progressive ways, we're finding out so much. Um, and I guess what happens is the perception of lack slips into that. And so it's then a comparison. It's like, yeah, now I've got bread and water, a roof over my head, clean running water, but I still don't have that. And I suppose maybe that's what some of the sense of lack. And then also, podcast is about trying to steal some of the limelight away from legacy media who have all the voice and run with all the narrative. And storytelling isn't just powerful, it's a tool. It can be weaponized, and it can be weaponized against people who won't necessarily get their voices heard or get their views or opinions
Mm.
heard. Um, for example, just on the global warming, in fact, I want to try and kind of get into conspiracy theories or be controversial from the get go. Um, it is interesting how all these other well accredited, researched scientists don't get their opinions heard. So I think there's a lot of things shifting in the world as well. It's an interesting time to do the podcast. We've got, the kind of the geopolitical sphere is kind of shape shifting at the moment. Everything's kind of changing in the world. And I think, yeah, I'm hoping that my podcast can capture some of that in a way that's positive and just bring conversation to it. And hopefully we can bring people on. And again, I'm hoping that, yeah, again, I hope that it's beneficial. My aim isn't to be controversial. My aim isn't to divide, and my aim isn't to kind of step out beyond my capacity or capability, but it's definitely to not be invisible and not have a voice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward
Fantastic.
to it.
Yeah. I shall watch with interest.
So again, we'll get all the information for you, Christopher, what you
Okay.
do, um, how people can get in touch with you, where you can be contacted, your website, etc. We'll put that in the description.
All right.
And
Lovely.
all I'm
Thank you.
going to say is it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you again for helping me tell my story. I want to thank you for being so amenable, so patient, and also so kind. Um, and definitely, obviously, want to recommend you to anybody who wants to use any aspect of your service, any of your kind of written skills, anything that you bring that's so important and so needed. And again, would recommend you without reservation to that end. So
Thank you.
um, all I want to say is this has been Broken Road's first episode. So I hope we get lots of listeners, and if we don't, we don't. But we'll definitely be doing our bit to get it out there and to draw people back to this. Um, and I just want to thank you. I want to thank Sophie and everybody that's been involved. And again, if you've liked what we've been talking about today, then please hit that little button, that little thumb, hit the notifications, join the channel, and I'm going to leave it there. And so I'll say goodbye to you, Christopher, and God
Thanks,
bless.
Colin.
And thanks so
Thanks, Sam.
much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.